you think Lois is the level-headed voice of reason within the Griffin family, you're dead wrong, because these are all the times Peter should have divorced her. And oh boy, we've got some real stinkers in here, starting with number 5. When Lois nearly killed Peter by gambling away the family car. The iconic bright red station wagon has been a staple of the show ever since season 1, and it's based on the 1975 Ford LTD, which makes it a bit of a classic when you think about it. Early in the episode, things start out fairly normal, with Chris showing everyone why he's a terrible Boy Scout, and Peter encouraging him to break the rules by building his son a racing car that will win the upcoming soapbox derby, even though rules clearly state that vehicles must be built by the scouts themselves. Anyway, Chris ends up with a false start, nearly turning the troop leader into a stain on the road, and he inevitably gets kicked out of the Youth Scouts program for being a total idiot. 2 years and not a single merit badge? That's gotta be rough for the poor kid. But Peter will not give up on his son, and decides that they're traveling to New York so they can sort things out in the Youth Scout head office. But along the way, Peter gets lost because he didn't bring a map, and despite Lois' best efforts to persuade him, he won't ask anyone for directions, because he's a manly man, and manly men do not ask for help. Fair enough, I guess. But then, Peter also reminds everyone that he had a prune smoothie for breakfast right before the trip.
Peter, the car is making funny noises.
Oh, you're wrong again, Lois. That wasn't the car. Oh, you were right about that prune smoothie.
Are you okay?
I'll be fine.
And that means he's got a serious case of diarrhea. The only bathroom they can find is a nearby casino, which, you guessed it, is owned by a family of Native Americans. Anyway, with Peter emptying his bowels for the next hour, Lois decides to amuse herself with the nearby poker machines. I find it funny how the handles on these machines are literally just tomahawks, and everyone in management is wearing their tribal garb, but putting aside ethnic stereotypes for a second. We quickly learn that Lois has become addicted to these poker machines.
Yeah.
Well, how you doing?
Yeah.
That's good, honey. Now, let's go.
Yeah.
And when she runs out of money in her purse, she decides to fuel her gambling addiction by betting the family car.
I sort of bet our car.
And she loses, which means the Griffins are now stranded in the middle of nowhere. But Peter hatches a clever plan to get the car back, and it involves him trying to convince the casino owner that he comes from a long line of Indian war chiefs. The plan backfires, with everyone in the casino seeing right through Peter's pathetic lie, and instead they challenge him to spend several days in the woods without any food or water until he has a spiritual awakening and is able to communicate with nature itself. Because that's what all Indians do, I guess. Anyway, Peter actually goes into the woods, nearly gets killed, and somehow manages to have a conversation with a bunch of trees, which entitles him to getting his car keys back from the greedy casino owner. Moral of the story: never let your low impulse control having wife anywhere near a casino, or she'll turn you into a penniless loser. But this is nothing compared to what Lois does next, which is cheating on her husband with a famous pop culture icon, an underage pop culture icon, who at the time was just 17. The person I'm referring to is none other than Justin Bieber. And yes, Lois Griffin dressed up as a teenager so she could attend one of his shows, because apparently she was having a midlife crisis, and Peter's antics in the bedroom just weren't hitting hard enough for her anymore. Family Guy does a very good job of depicting Bieber as someone who's popular with teenage girls, but otherwise reviled by everyone with a T count above 50. And he's immediately booed as soon as he shows his face on stage. Meanwhile, Lois, when she's not getting tattoos on her back or acting like a horny teenager in front of the kids, decides that the best way to relive her youth is by wasting the family's money on lots of expensive parties, and she drags Peter along with her, who reluctantly gives in to her demands so he can keep his wife happy. But little did he know that Lois would cheat on him by sneaking into a Bieber concert and flashing her, assets to secure a backstage pass. But while Justin seems weirded out by the whole experience, Peter busts in at just the right time to find Lois and Justin in a rather precarious position. He does beat the crap out of Justin, which is always nice to see, but he should have done one more thing: shown Lois the door and kicked her out of the family for playing her silly little games. Now, Lois has already been exposed as a lying pervert who solicits happy times from teenagers half her age, but at least she didn't go to jail for that crime. However, a few years before the whole Bieber incident, Lois did develop an affinity for shoplifting and was ultimately given a jail sentence for her crimes. It all started with a seemingly harmless shopping trip to the local mall, where Lois realizes that she's a couple dollars short, and instead of putting the ham back on the shelves, decides to hide it in her impossibly bag. How the cashier didn't see the thing bulging out the side is beyond me. But hey, that's Family Guy physics for you. Lois's bag must be some kind of portal into a different dimension, because she can fit several aisles worth of goods into this thing. With that one innocuous robbery of a simple ham, Lois's confidence grows, and her taste starts to get more bourgeois. she starts robbing designer clothes, jewelry, silverware, and even paintings, turning into Quahog's foremost cat burglar. At this point, I'm sure Lois could give Catwoman a run for her money. And it's funny how none of the neighbors notice the steadily increasing amount of expensive decor in the Griffin household, as well as all the blatantly stolen stuff just lying out there in the open. But hey, that's Family Guy logic for you. Lois eventually gets caught, and the judge is about to let her off with a lenient sentence since it's her first time. But then he notices that his gavel is missing. Even in the courtroom, Lois can't control her obsession with stealing stuff, and as a result, she gets a 3-year sentence. And while she's rotting away in the prison, the Griffin household falls into complete disarray, as Peter is a useless goofball. In a perfect world, Lois would have returned home to a divorce paper, but Peter, being the kind-hearted man that he is, lets her off yet again. Alright guys, if you're Lois, what could possibly be worse than trying to cheat on your husband with Justin Bieber and getting yourself imprisoned for shoplifting? I'll tell you what, cheating on your husband by seducing your own daughter's boyfriend. Yes, that is something Lois actually does in Season 8, Episode 13. What really stood out to me when I watched this episode is how shocked Meg's parents are at the fact that she has a normal boyfriend who is actually decent looking and doesn't have any weird vocal tics or eccentric hobbies. I mean, he's just a regular Joe, and he seems to like Meg a lot, which is a bonus. Normally, given how Meg is treated in the show, you'd expect her date to be some kind of Shrek-looking fella or a guy who's paralyzed from the waist down and rolls around in a wheelchair. But no, Meg's boyfriend, for this episode, Anthony, is a totally regular dude, and this is so abnormal that the entire neighborhood drops by to watch them together, like it's the birth of Jesus or something. And they even call Dr. Hartman, who does a medical checkup on Anthony, to make sure that yes, he is indeed a normal human, and not some kind of otherworldly alien creature wearing a human skin suit. Later in the episode, Lois is reminded by Peter of her advancing age, and she starts noticing little strands of gray hair on her head, which makes her increasingly paranoid and self-conscious, ultimately creating a hunger for some young company so she can convince herself that she's still desirable. When Meg leaves Anthony alone with Lois on the family couch, she starts hitting on him, and Anthony is surprisingly seduced by Lois', let's call it matriarchal charm, which leads to the two then making out on the family couch. Meg returns home to this horrifying sight of her mom making out with her boyfriend and starts breaking her own teeth to threaten Lois, who then confronts Peter, claiming that it's all his fault. At this point, Peter should have reminded Lois that it was ultimately her lust for younger men that led her to commit this depraved act, but he begrudgingly admits that it was his own advancing age and lack of fitness that led him to lash out at her earlier, and the two make up once Peter apologizes. And yet, somehow, not even this was the limit of Lois's depravity, as in Season 5, Episode 16, she would sell her body to strangers to pay for Chris's school. Yeah, Lois was doing the hardcore version of OnlyFans before OnlyFans was a thing, and the reason all of this happens is quite ridiculous to begin with. Basically, the principal at Chris's school mentions in a PTA meeting that the school can't afford new textbooks because of the No Child Left Behind Act, which results in them expelling the dumbest kid in class. Two guesses as to who that is. Peter and Lois try to talk things out, but they just can't seem to find an alternate school that would accept someone with the academic deficiencies of Chris. And so ultimately, Lois prostrates herself in front of her wealthy father, who agrees to use his influence to get Chris into the prestigious Morningwood Academy on the condition that Peter humiliates himself. However, it quickly turns into a money trap, as the Griffins are forced to take extra jobs so they can afford Chris's extremely expensive tuition fees. Remember, Morningwood Academy is exclusively for millionaires and their kids, and Chris is shunned and bullied by all his classmates for being a filthy commoner, which leads him to depression. But the most shocking revelation is that while Peter has been making extra money by selling butt scratchers, Lois has been, how shall I say this, using her body as a lady of the night, and she even brought Meg along for the ride, which is just heinous in my opinion. Chris is even more depressed after learning about this, and I'm honestly surprised that Peter didn't smack Lois on the spot after learning what she has been doing behind his back. Yes, their child's education is important, but I don't think anything justifies this level of depravity, and even Chris ultimately decides to leave Morningwood Academy so he can return to his old school, a place that his parents can actually afford. But guys, that's all I have for this video. Which of Lois's actions was the most divorce-worthy in your opinion? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more Family Guy rankings like this, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, adios.